Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. I can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you got a good spot. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
Good morning, everybody. I forgot to turn on the lights. There, that looks better. Music's going. Linen is pressed. Okay, let's come over to the camera. The charts, not the camera, the charts. All right, well, this morning, 10-year Treasury is shooting up here. I don't know if I missed something, if there is a story out there, or if they're just really want to buy it now, but we are at 110.10 in the Treasury. You can see it has pulled back a little bit, though, since whatever this was. So maybe some news. We'll try and do a little research here in a second. S&P 500 is falling apart. Ooh, okay, so this is a risk-off move. Very lovely, lovely. Okay. Here I am. It's a risk-off move, and I'm like, oh, yay. Trump 50% tariffs on the EU June 1st. Okay, thank you, Uzi. That would definitely do it. Gold. Gold moving up. Silver, not so much. Interesting. Copper. Ooh, copper taking a hit off of that, actually. So that must mean that they think that this is a recessionary thing. January 6th. Or sorry, why am I thinking that? It's the 6J. It's the Japanese yen. Hey, well, you know, they're kind of recovered that downside from yesterday. But the dollar getting a little weaker. And Bitcoin. Ooh, Bitcoin taking a hit too. Okay, very interesting. So this is very much in line with a risk-off move. Let's see, I need to move over a little bit. That's telling me I'm too far over. Fix the collar a little bit. VIX is over 25. Macro hedge funds have piled into big risk-off bets. Okay, so I'm actually thinking about this. Donald Trump says 50% tariffs on the EU starting June 1st. Why am I having a hard time talking here? So the last headline that I had seen about the EU was that they were like trying to jumpstart negotiations or something. So I'm kind of wondering, this is like way super speculative and conspiratorial. I'm kind of wondering if this is not Donald Trump turn up the heat because he thinks that he's going to get, because things actually are progressing with the EU. You know what I mean? In other words, that 50% tariff will come right back down. It might take a few weeks, but that it will come right back down. That's kind of what I'm wondering. By the way, thanks everybody for being here earlier. Ray, Ruber, Belligerent, Uzi. And thanks for giving me the headline here. It's not on zero hedge yet, but let me pop through here. That's actually a pretty slow up move if that's the story. Trade war was never going to be one and done. Trump loves tariffs too much and has too long a list of grievances. The lack of progress on trade deals over the past 2 weeks was a red flag, and the 90-day deadline was ticking ever closer. He's let himself an out here by delaying this to June 1st, but at the same time, I think he's handing some leverage to China here in negotiations. How many fronts does the U.S. want to fight at once? The past 2 weeks have been a wonderful placid moment and a glimpse into what could be, but until Congress takes away Trump's ability to impose tariffs, this dance will continue, says Forex Live. I think that Trump probably thinks that he's got everything squared away with China, and that he is very upset that the EU has been like the most adversarial. That's not necessarily why all of a sudden he's like, oh, it's going to go up to 50%, right? Jim Uriel, let's take a step back. You really think that the EU is not going to negotiate and come to an agreement? You think that we are going to become a bitter trade enemy? Great, have a nice day. Yeah, I feel pretty confident. I feel pretty confident that they will come to a deal. It's just a question of how much carnage happens in the meantime. So did Donald Trump tweet, or did... Brannigan Barrett says there is no trade between the U.S. and the EU with a 50% tariff. The market has learned from the China talks. Who is truth? Okay. Ah, yes. The European Union, which was formed for the primary purpose of taking advantage of the United States on trade, has been very difficult to deal with. They have been. I agree. I agree with them on that one. It's curious to me that the EU are the ones that are like the most opposed. And I think part of it is that they just really hate Donald Trump. But I also think part of it is that they've always kind of viewed it as an adversarial trade relationship with the United States, that their goal is to get as much from the U.S. as they can. Their powerful trade barriers, VAT taxes, ridiculous corporate penalties, non-monetary trade barriers, monetary manipulations, unfair and unjustified lawsuits against American companies, and more have led to a trade deficit with the U.S. of more than $250 million a year. That's not that much. A number which is totally unacceptable. Our discussions with them are going nowhere. Therefore, I am recommending a straight 50% tariff on the European Union. He's recommending. Starting on the 1st of June, there is no tariff if the product is built or manufactured in the United States. Thank you for your attention on this matter. You're welcome, sir. Okay. Well, it looks like we need to roll the oil here, huh? Because it is in June, so it should be N. CLN. 2025. And we're still in May on the micros. The 10-year liquidity looks okay, but the 2-year is even worse than normal. Hey, look, the 30-year actually has a bid, though, so that's interesting. It's 485. That's good to know. Yep, it's CLN. June is N. First, July is N. June is M. MN. So it starts F, right? Why does it start with F? Can somebody explain to the way that they pick the codes does not make any sense to me. You know, so I got these headphones from Audeze, Audeze, and they were supposed to ship at the beginning of May, and they updated their product page to say the end of May. But it sounds to me like they haven't gotten their shipment yet. And I'm wondering, is it because of tariffs and all of that? Is it because the boat that's supposed to bring them all over hasn't left China? I wonder. So now you're doing this with the EU. How crazy does that get? Hope you're not planning on buying a BMW or anything like. Okay, so here's another thing. Is like one of the things in the tax bill, I guess, is like a rebate or something if you buy an American-made car. I do not think that American-made cars are struggling because of price. I think American-made cars are struggling because unless you're buying a truck, they're not as good. I think I would still rather have a Toyota, although an older Toyota, because the last years of Toyota weren't very good. Yeah, I think so. Or like if I'm going to get a luxury vehicle, should I get a Buick or a Cadillac? Maybe I should, but you know, I thought those were like old people cars. No, those are they are really trying to fight against that impression. No, I know that they're trying to fix that. Still, I just don't see myself in a I see myself. I have an Acura. I really like the Acura. I could see myself getting a Lexus, but a Cadillac. I guess it doesn't really matter as long as I think it's gonna run for a really long time. It has a nice stereo. Needs the nice stereo. I saw a Corolla GR on the road yesterday. I would really like a Corolla GR, but the stereo sucks. By the way, interestingly enough, the biggest winner right now is gold, up 1.9%. And UB is only up 0.27. ZN is up 0.34. So the curve is steepening. Have you looked into the new Golf R? No. What's cool about the new Golf R? I've seen those around. There's actually like 2 of them over at my work. For some reason, people at the company I work for like Mustangs. There's like 5 Mustangs in the parking lot. is a Mustang, yeah. Well, I do look at the... I think I would rather have a hatchback. And I do see that Mustang hatchback rolling around. And it kind of seems to me like it's an okay car that nobody wants that version of it. So that might be a good pickup. You say that it's like the Corolla, GR Corolla on steroids? Well, does it look cool? Doesn't look as cool. What about the interior? Oh, that's a big interior. 2025 Volkswagen Golf R. 48,000, 49,000 MSRP. That's pretty good. It has a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder. I'm liking it with all-wheel drive. An optional drift mode. Oh my. But it still offers the same logical space efficient cargo hold formula that's kept the standard R on the mark. I don't know if I look for the black edition. Why the black edition? Okay, sadly, it will no longer be offered with the manual transmission. An illuminated VW badge on the front grille, new headlights. A revised infotainment system, including a 12.9 touchscreen, larger shift paddles, black edition, a cosmetic variant with darkened badges. Traditionally, the Golf R is sold as a fully loaded model in the US, and the primary decision a buyer will need to make was whether to order the stick or the automatic. With the manual gone, it's now an easier choice of whether to black out the car's visuals or not. With pricing this close, we'd say go for the black edition in order to add a little personalization. There's also an exciting Euro-style package that VW says saves around 80 pounds. It gets rid of the sunroof, swaps in manually adjustable front seats, and includes a meaner sounding Akrapovic exhaust system that's lighter than the standard setup. Well, I don't care. I want the audio. And they don't say anything about the audio. It needs to have like a giant subwoofer in the back or something. So silly. Okay, so you know what? I feel like I'm being super ADHD today, but like it really bothers me collars. Like if I undo the collar, I wish it stayed like this. I don't like that it goes or like this. No. It needs to like stay. You know? I don't like it. I need to get new undershirts. Maybe I think that my wife is going to be home today and tomorrow, so I don't know what we're going to do, but we should do something, including a little bit of clothing. Man, I feel like, you know, that the market is moving. This is a significant thing, but the 10-year hasn't done that much. So again, I don't know. Yesterday was interesting because we had as good of a trend as we've seen in a while, but it wasn't super huge. Oh, by the way, I didn't turn on the robot. It wasn't a super huge change in cumulative delta. So I still kind of felt like the treasury market is kind of a little dead. And now here today, it's pretty... So remember yesterday when we were talking with Octavius, I think it was, about, you know, he was going to skip today. I was like, I don't know, some significant things would happen. Well, we did have significant things happen. We did have the trade war ramp up. But so far, it hasn't really resulted in good trade for us over in the Treasury, has it? So I think that he wins this one. I'll look up the review from Savage Goose. He has a GR Corolla up against the Golf R. Well, I don't know if it matters unless I'm going to put my own sound system in it. I think I would be better. So, you know what's another thing that drives you crazy? Is I prefer a small car.
Order submitted.
I prefer like a smaller, compact. You can fit it in everywhere. It's more nimble. It's usually just me in the car, driving myself to work every day. You know, if I'm driving kids, it's the van, right? So I think I would rather have a compact or something that is primarily for the driver in the front seat and maybe a passenger. But there aren't really very many luxury compact vehicles because of the regulations. Oh, that reminds me. I posted a TikTok last night. Anybody respond to that TikTok? Oh, okay. Well, it did get some views. Yesterday, when I was looking at it, it was only like, listen, I'm in TikTok jail, but this one only had like 150 views, and I'm like, what's wrong? Why ain't they watching this one? Al, this guy says recovered is the wrong word. Okay, I'll give you that. When I posted the video, we were like right here, and it was kind of like, okay, like, look, we overcame that thing, but you know, so just a little bit higher. Is that a huge deal? No, it's not. That kind of is a big deal, though. I follow you on TikTok, but I don't get your video. I know it's the dumbest thing. So here's what happens. Here's how I understand it. Is that TikTok creates like a model audience. So some of that model audience does include your subscribers, but it also includes just people that are like particularly interested in that niche, okay? And you post and it goes out to that segment, and then if they like it, then it moves on to the next segment, and that kind of determines how many views that you get. So it's like you go from silos, right? So you are not in the test audience, even though you subscribe to me. That's why TikTok created the following page versus the For You page, because the For You page shows you what the algorithm thinks you're going to be the most likely to view, and the following page is for the content that you're actively subscribed to, because they find that a lot of people don't actually watch the creators that they're subscribed to, which is kind of lame, right? I actually wonder if, I mean, this has been a thing in all social media for a while, right? But I'm kind of feel like that's like a mistake. Like, yeah, in the short term, you probably do get more engaged people. But I think that what's happening is in the long term, the influencers are struggling. You don't get as many established influencers, and the content suffers as a result, and eventually people get bored of the platform. Like when 2020 happened 4 or 5 years ago now, TikTok was amazing, especially at the beginning. Was like, oh my gosh, there's so much funny stuff, there's so much interesting stuff. And then all of a sudden it turned into like, there's so much thought leadership over there and discussion about issues that I find interesting and yada yada yada. And now these days, like, I almost feel like I get onto it out of obligations sometimes. I'm not spending as much time over there. I'm really only on it because, like, there's nothing better to do. If I can find the long-form content on YouTube that I'm more interested in, I definitely do that first. So yeah, screw TikTok. And I think part of it was we think that this is more engaging, but I also honestly think part of it is they don't really want really big, powerful creators on TikTok. Because what happened to Vine was you got a small subset of creators that were so ridiculously successful on Vine compared to everybody else that those creators basically all said, well, you're not paying us enough, so we're going to leave. And they didn't negotiate with them, so they left and it killed the platform. So TikTok doesn't want that to happen. Which is kind of, isn't that a little bit messed up? Like, oh, if we can't take all of the money, if we actually have to pay the creators what they're really honestly probably worth, then we would rather just go down as a company. Are you kidding me? That's so crazy. It's kind of bizarre to me also that online creators have so little negotiating power in that relationship, you know? I'm just going to button this up for a little bit so that it kind of learns the memory and sits where I want it to. It's better. It doesn't look like denim, so that's cool. Oh yeah, you keep that up. Was browsing and I found this one post about this person experience after 4 years at Google. So I worked for a big bank, and even way back then, working for the big bank was really equivalent to working at like a bank company. I don't think that people realize that, but it was very much so. I remember like we had our own private cloud before Azure and all of these things came about. I remember when they announced Azure and AWS and everything, and we're like, oh, so it'll be like the only analog that people had for me was, oh, it'll be like this GS thing, but like everybody can use it. Okay. But I've never, after that, gone back to another large company like that. I was working at smaller companies and I was pretty happy there. The healthcare exchange, they were pretty good. They gave me pretty good raises and everything up until the end. And then, you know, I got taken by somebody else. But then I kind of wonder if those people were kind of, I don't know. Because like almost immediately they were like looking to well, things shifted, but I really felt targeted. It was like, oh well, this guy makes too much money. He's not part of our group. We're gonna get rid of him. Kind of what happened. So I kind of feel like that they enticed me in with like a really good salary, only to let me go a year later, and that they always kind of intended on doing that maybe. But I never went back to a FANG company. And when I read about working particularly at Google, working for Google sounds like a nightmare. And this particular post makes it even more so. But I haven't been able to read all of it. But just for instance, this very first one. Agile is a sin. I come from companies that do agile processes. It's not perfect, but it's empowering and very adaptive to change. I've been told that agile processes do not scale. So when I joined Google, I was extremely interested in learning how and what Google does to ship software. They must be doing something slightly different or better to ship software at scale, right? Well, an agile team tends not to scale beyond like a dozen people. At that point, you split them into separate teams, and then they're each doing their own agile thing, which usually necessitates microservices, by the way. Anyways, they must be doing something slightly different or better to ship software at scale, right? Wrong. They quite literally don't have processes around collaboration. It's basically waterfall. Product writes up a document, gets buy-in from leadership, and tosses it at engineering. And then we never see them again. We're left to implement it as we see fit. That just sounds like a terrible process. It's literally the most expensive and high-risk software development I've seen in my entire career. They basically have blind faith. They've hired super smart people that will just magically build the perfect product, which, to be fair, they do quite literally have a lot of rockstar developers, but relying purely on heroics to ship software is a recipe for burnout and knowledge silos. Also, they don't ship software. Deadlines are arbitrary. There are so many times when we approach a deadline only for X feature needs to be absolutely there in release, so we'll just push out the release. I think deadlines are stupid, so I don't want to pretend like I care about them, but I do care about shipping software. The sooner you ship, the sooner you can start to learn and prove that your core assumptions are right or wrong. So to ship sooner, you need to downscope. If your minimal viable product requires several really difficult features to implement, maybe it's not a minimal viable product anymore. But then again, I guess no one called it an MVP but me, who is used to shipping software regularly. So just that first part makes me go like, oh my gosh. Do you know that, like, oh, if you get hired at Google, that you're not like actually hired? Or most of the time you're not actually hired. What happens is you get in and then you have to find a team fit, which means that you have to go around and interview with individual teams and everything to get picked up by an individual team. That sounds like a nightmare. Is like you're interviewing, you get the job, and then you have to interview to find a job within the company. No thank you. No thank you. No. I think if I did go to a big company like that, maybe Microsoft. You know what's another one? Let me tell you what. This will shock you if you're into computer stuff. You know who I think the worst, like, big company out there is on this sort of stuff? Is Canonical, the guys that make Ubuntu. Oh my gosh. Like, what they want from their developers and everything is absolutely ridiculous. Their hiring process is insane. I think that there's, so one of the things that happened was software developers were really in demand, especially those top level software developers. And so companies were really paying a lot to get them. And this has a long history going back much further than we think. Like, if you've never watched what is it called? I don't even remember, but they basically made a movie about BlackBerry. And BlackBerry were one of the ones that like really started this, where it was like they hire people and they would give them stock options, which apparently the way that they did it was not legal, but they'd give them stock options so that, these developers were literally making millions a year working for BlackBerry. And that's how they were able to attract the very best engineers and do some of the crazy stuff that they did early on with BlackBerry before they lost just completely and utterly to Apple, right? And So that's kind of like a thing that's been going on, and companies were doing everything that they could to try and attract the top talent. And that's part of why. Are we trading or talking? We're talking right now, to be honest. To be honest with you. I guess I could possibly justify the having been in the long here. But the action so far has still been a little lackluster. Also, my robot has been kind of flipping around in here. It took 2 losses. So, anyways, yeah, so, that's kind of where they started doing all this stuff like, we're going to give you these hard code reviews and things like that. So people started to associate that difficult hiring process with the people that were really seeking the best engineers and were going to pay the best, right? But what ended up happening eventually was they kept the super, super hard, grueling interview process, and everybody adopted that, but they didn't adopt the high salaries as in response. So it's like you're going through this crazy hiring process with no real reward to it in the end. You end up working in a company that's actually maybe not that great. And now we're in this world where like the employer really seems to have the advantage, and they just treat the people that are interviewing like trash. That's Goolsby. I didn't hear that. I wonder if my news squawk is broken again. It seems like if I leave it open overnight that it doesn't pick it up correctly. Rate cuts are still possible over a 10 to 16 month horizon. I agree. Actually, let's look that up real quick. To be fair, most of coding programming is about knowing how to read documentation and thinking from first principles. Let's see what happens with all the vibe coders. Yeah. I think I said this yesterday, but I'll say it again. I think that the biggest damage that vibe coding does is it enables bad decisions. Like if you make a platform infrastructure decision, you might not even realize that it's like a significant infrastructure decision. And, one that might make it very, very difficult for you to get anything done. And then you're vibe coding it. Not even if you're vibe coding it. Let's say you know what you're doing, but you're just relying really heavily on the LLM to do stuff for you. Then the LLM will help you find the way to make it work, even though it's a terrible decision. So it's creating an insane amount of technical debt. Like things that eventually it's not going to scale, and you're going to have to go back and change it. So I'm really careful to, I'll ask it to challenge, okay, so I want you to write something like this, and it will write it. But then I'll ask it like, okay, but is that really the best way to do it? Maybe I should do it this way or this way or this way. And then it can give you really, really good answers. It can actually give you really good information to help you make architectural decisions. Remember that the thing that makes the LLM powerful is that it's collecting information from everywhere. It's extremely thorough. If I go in and I research about a subject, I might read a couple of little things and then feel like I know what's going on, but the LLM, it's practically calling upon the entire knowledge of the internet into your query if you query it right. So you can get really thorough answers, and it can do really good at things like design decisions if you're just asking the right questions, right? I guess the other thing that it really, really hurts is, like I don't memorize or understand the syntax as well, for instance. I need to do so yesterday I was having a problem I've been messing with Bitbucket pipelines and building Docker images in Bitbucket, and I keep running into a lot of really bizarre issues with like the YAML code and stuff like that. Like the format just doesn't always make sense, and you know, like there's lots of good example code to go off of, but I very, very often find that when I want to take things a step further and do stuff that I'm not finding tutorial code for and whatnot, that the documentation does not explain what I can do very well. And so then I'll ask the LLM and it will just go in a circle. I'll be like, oh, I have this problem. Oh, you should change it to this. And then you change it to that. And I get this error and it says, oh, you should change it back to what you just had. But that failed too. That's one thing I really don't like about AI is it's so willing to accept your initial directive. I want to be told that I'm wrong. Well, you can absolutely get it to tell you that you're wrong. You just have to ask it, right? You can say, I'm thinking about doing this. Give me your best, challenge all of my assumptions and give me all the reasons why maybe this isn't a good decision, and it'll do a good job at it. Actually, you want to do that right now? Here, let's one thing at a time. Let's check out FedWatch real quick. Okay, so right now for June, not much. Oh yeah, we need like compare right here. Okay, July. Okay, so there when we were like a month ago, there was actually a pretty high chance that we were going to get one in July. There's still a 27% chance, but they've definitely pushed out. In September, though, they're still saying most likely that they do it in September, although it's only to like 50%, interestingly enough. And then we get to October.
Order canceled.
Not very many people think that we will still have 4.25 to 4.5 by December. Okay. Let's go to ChatGPT chat. I want to make a platform. I want to make my own trading platform that would be written in Rust, allow custom indicators and strategies in Python. And has ready-made solutions for market depth, data, and machine learning. Challenge my idea and give me reasons why this might not be a good idea. When you start to see it thinking, that's where I think things really get wild. Because as far as I understand, like that's how people think too. I'll have it read it out when it's done. I'd rather it read it than I read it. Try Gemini for coding. Yeah, so if I go back into looking, the thing that I was working on yesterday, because I tell you what. Okay, so something really, really frustrating to me is I've been doing a bunch of stuff. One of the things is we're trying to get people to move over to some slightly different Git flows, essentially. one where, you know, they create release branches and then there's long running branches, so that you can very quickly just look at those 3 branches and know what the state of things is, because they're having a little bit of a problem with that, or at least some of the product managers are having a hard time managing that. There's like one QA team and they're like split between everybody, and so they're just having a hard time tracking that. So I think that flow would probably work for them better, because I mean there's lots of different ways to do it and they're all perfectly valid, right? We're trying to move them over to that. So I did that for one team, and that we put in a pull request to like do some automated builds when they committed to certain branches, right? But I just had the pull request, and I was just talking to people about it, and I didn't expect them to pull it. and so when he pulled it, it tried to deploy something to production, which wasn't very good. So like bunch of chaos about that question about, oh, well, okay, so we're moving over to this. Do we really want to, right? Because some of it is a little bit just like, okay, well, we're experimenting a little bit. We're moving some teams over to it. We haven't necessarily made it like the mandated everybody moves over to this immediately sort of a thing yet. I think that it will be at some point, but right now we're just kind of mixing things up a little bit, right? So because of all that, I was getting lots of conversations with people and doing a bunch of stuff, and I had a list of like a dozen different things that I was like working on at the same time, right? And then like when everything hit the crescendo, it was like, okay, now like things are actually about to happen and go into place and everything, and like it's the holiday, right? So lots of people are gone and all of those sorts of things. So I've gone back to one thing that I did earlier that I got working, but I just didn't like the way that it ended up working. And so I've been trying to fix it. And I've had a hard time getting it to work the way that I want it to work. And ChatGPT gives me just absolutely stupid advice on that particular thing. And so I really need to try something else. Gemini, Grok, what's the other one that people have always said is good for coding? I'm going to try some of the other ones. I kind of like ChatGPT because of like the deep research option and things like that. So I don't know. I should do some more research today, maybe about what the capabilities are, because like my bigger vision here is I would like to make something that is like I guess like a multi-agent advisor. So like one agent, and it wouldn't necessarily be like a large language model agent, but let's say I have one model that just tries to predict what momentum funds will do, for instance, right? One model that just tries to predict what risk parity and index funds are going to do with their monthly and quarterly rebalancing. What do I think? There's just all of these different players in the market, and I make a model for what I think each one of those players are going to do, and make a prediction for the flows that I expect to see over the next day, week, and month, right? And then I want to have one that is like, what is all of the news out there? What is like the actual fundamental state and all of this, right? And then have all of that information collected together into one LLM to give me advice on where to take things, because that's essentially what I'm doing on my own anyways, but I'm picking up scattered pieces of information all of the time. I'm not necessarily factoring in every part every day. So because, I have limited resources. So if I can have LLMs do it for me, then I might be able to make something super, super powerful, right? So to do that, I need to have LLMs and agents that are a little bit more customized than the default ChatGPT. And you you can make your own GPTs if you have a subscription, or at least you could. I messed around with that a little bit, and then you can kind of like train it and things like that. But I had a lot of problems with like getting custom data into it, and like I need something where like I can give it as the Zero Hedge login and tell it to read every Zero Hedge article from the past day to do its analysis, right? Yeah, I guess you mean the guy committed that to a branch and it triggered a deployment that he wasn't. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It was okay. It was fine. They weren't ready to push it out, but it was pretty minor changes. So like I doubt that anybody even noticed that it happened, and it was very easy for them to just switch it back. But I wasn't ready for them to merge it. Do you test Manus AI? I haven't heard of that one. Okay, let's read what ChatGPT wrote now.
Below are the most common stumbling blocks I see when traders decide to build a full-blown platform from scratch, especially one that mixes Rust for the core, Python for extensions, and batteries included depth of market plus machine learning features. Think of them as friction points to budget for, time-wise, emotionally, and financially, before you dive in. 1. Rust. Python is elegant on paper, but the reality is glue code heavy. FFI friction and the gills, you'll spend a surprising share of your time writing PHIO3 maturing wrappers, juggling lifetimes,
German Foreign
converting
Minister on
NumPy
Trump tariffs
arrays into
says
Rust
both
slices,
markets would suffer.
handling
That's why
Rust
we want
panics
to
inside
further
Python,
negotiations.
and making sure Python's GIL isn't a latency bottleneck when your depth of book feed spikes. Distribution headaches. Shipping a single cross-platform binary that embeds a Python interpreter, plus TensorFlow, PyTorch, Pandas, etc., quickly balloons into a 300 megabytes installer. Each OS Arch combo needs its own artifact and CI pipeline. Debugging across two runtimes.
I would like to have Apple help the US to make semiconductor supply chains better again.
Supporting retail traders who just want to code an indicator becomes tech support hell. Number 2. Market depth data is expensive, bursty, and latency sensitive. Exchange licensing and redistribution. Deep order book feeds, CME MDP 3.0, NASDAQ Total View, Oprah, carry monthly fees and strict rules on caching, throttling, and display. Passing those costs to end users makes your pricing resemble pro-grade terminals they can already rent. Event storm handling. A single Fed minutes release can push tight 200K messages on ES futures. Achieving deterministic microsecond handling in Rust is great, but as soon as a user's Python strategy subscribes, you re-enter the GIL and lose determinism. Replay and backfill. Providing on-demand historical depth data mandatory for ML means petabytes of storage or a pricey partnership with a tick data vendor.
We're doing it on our side for sure.
3. Machine learning ready-made is an overloaded promise. Model lifecycle, model code. Traders need hyperparameter sweeps, walk-forward testing, feature stores, retraining triggers, drift detection, and inference latency SLAs. That's ML ops, an entire product area, not a checkbox. GPU versus low-latency CPU. Order book inference often works best on CPUs with tight cache locality, whereas training wants GPUs. Supporting
US
both
Treasury
paths
Secretary
multiplies
Bessent says,
complexity.
I am not expecting the
Reg
US
tech
Senate
hurdles.
to change the budget bill
If US
much.
users auto-trade with ML models, you inherit reasonable basis obligations. Reg 13C35 style pre-trade risk, and perhaps CFTC CTA registration if they copy your templates. 4. GUI UX. Iced is promising but still maturing. Complex widgets. Depth ladder, footprint, heat map, multi-timeframe charts, draggable DOM columns. The controls serious order flow traders expect
Bessent
aren't
adds
out of
not
the box.
expecting a need for
You'll
much
code them
tax bill
yourself or
change
wrap
in the
WebView
Senate.
tech,
Just
at
to
which
repeat.
point Rust's big advantage, native speed, erodes. Accessibility and theming. High contrast retina, multi-monitor support, box
Bessent
scaling,
says we've
RTL.
just got to be
For
careful
retail
on the
adoption, these are
timing of the
table
tax
stakes.
bill.
Iced's ecosystem isn't as turnkey as Electron Reactor Qt.
5.
Resource trade-off with your opportunity cost.
Why did it read 5 like that?
Every week spent debugging a
What was that?
error is a week not refining your cumulative delta models, shooting pillar content videos, or talking to prop desks that might seed fund you. Feedback loop delay. You thrive on quickly testing hypotheses, news, order flow. Building infrastructure first elongates that loop. You may discover your thesis has evolved by the time the plumbing.
See, it knows enough about me and what we're doing to say maybe that's not a good strategy for the channel.
Crowded, build your own strat in
Isn't that crazy?
Space. Quant Connect, Backtrader, Zipline, QDK, Sierra Chart Assail, NinjaTrader's Python add-ins, even TradingView's simplified machine learning libraries, all let users script in Python today. Many with deeper broker integrations.
We asked ChatGPT to challenge my idea of making our own trading platform.
Yields better fills or unique data they can't get elsewhere.
And Fed's Schmidt were speaking in a fireside chat on the economy.
Both ongoing commitments.
There's no text expected, but there will be a Q&A.
7. Long-run maintenance
US Treasury
and liability.
Secretary Bessent says far along with India in trade
Exchange
talks.
spec changes, Python package CVEs,
Says that most countries are negotiating in good faith except
rules.
the EU.
Each demands timely patches. Solo founders often burn out on
Bessent
keeping the
adds
lights
these
on.
deals are moving
Legal
quickly.
exposure. If a bug in your execution layer mishandles fractionals or freezes the DOM,
So
a
Bessent's
user's
saying
fat
many of the
finger
Asian
loss can
nations
become
have
your
come with very
lawsuit.
good deals.
Professional indemnity insurance is non-trivial. 8. Capital and team reality check. One-person show, sustainable SaaS. Serious platforms need at least core engine dev, UI UX, DevOps, data vendor relations, compliance, customer success, and marketing. Wearing all hats slows velocity. Outsourcing dilutes vision and cash flow. Self-fund versus VC. Bootstrapping means slower feature cadence. VC means growth targets that might force compromises, e.g., dropping Python to hit mobile. What to do with this? 1. Prototype the differentiator first. Stand up a minimal CLI backtester in Rust that feeds a Python strategy. Measure overhead, package it, and give it to 5 traders. If they don't instantly say, I need this, rethink. 2. Leverage existing pipes. Build your edge as a plugin for an established platform, e.g. NinjaTrader plus external Rust microservice, before recreating the whole stack. You'll learn what features matter without the full capex. 3. Validate the business, not the tech. Hold a webinar. Here's a depth of book ML toolkit. Want early access for XGO? Gauge conversions before you code 80-hour weeks. A question to leave you with. What exactly will your platform let traders do tomorrow that they cannot realistically achieve today by combining existing tools? NinjaTrader, Sierra Chart, a Rust microservice, and a Jupyter notebook. If the answer isn't crisp and monetizable, you may be better served doubling down on the research and media strengths you already have.
So it's questioned there at the end. Like NinjaTrader, Sierra Chart, microservice, and a Jupyter notebook. So if you have like a separate sidecar service, that might work. I don't know if you could do it through a Jupyter notebook though. Right. So there's that's kind of the whole thing is that what you have to do these sorts of things right now doesn't work very well. But the problem is will retail traders actually want it? I don't know. It would have to be like really simple, you know? Wondering how good, bad the default data feed and order execution latency in NinjaTrader. I'm based in the US and it looks like I have to host in a US cloud provider. Yeah, if you're doing algorithmic trading, you definitely want to get on one of those co-located cloud platforms. I would say that NinjaTrader is pretty okay, but there are some things about the way that it works that's going to add some latency. So if you were doing something where you really had to be like the absolute fastest, NinjaTrader wouldn't be sufficient. And you'd probably have to build your own
Russia and
platform.
Ukraine exchanged 270 prisoners of war each.
But I do think that it is right. So like the biggest risk that I've seen, and the thing that kind of makes me think like maybe this isn't the thing right now,
open for the
is that GUI in Rust is just not there. It's just not there yet. And I don't know if it ever will be. And the interoperability between Rust and Python is a little bit questionable. So that's why I'm not like, oh, I absolutely have to do this now or somebody else is going to do it and I'm going to miss the opportunity to become a millionaire. And, you know, I'm kind of like, actually, we can kind of just wait and see where it goes and pursue things as they come to us. So, which actually reminds me, because somebody wanted me to take a look at a platform. And, I don't know if they sent me something. Maybe we could install it in the last 30 minutes that we've got here.
Markets on open imbalance. S&P 500 sell side 571 million. Nasdaq 100 sell side 7 million. Dow 30 sell side 112 million. Mag 7 a small buy side 2.3 million.
So we'll talk about it on Monday. But there was a platform that wanted me to look at it. There's some programming on the platform. It's a platform that it's ATAS. So, you know, we've messed with it a little bit, but not super seriously. But some of the things that they were talking about kind of sounded like it would be a really good development platform. And since it's already in C#, hopefully our stuff could transfer over to it. So I think that one is worth looking at. Sorry for those of you that are on CR charts and want me to make it in CR charts, but it's just, I think right now the time that it would take to port it over to CR charts isn't worth it.
So Apple shares shed more than $100 billion in market value.
What is the
following Trump's announcement
news squawk?
As he threatens tariffs on Apple on Tuesday.
Financial juice. It's financial juice. Have you looked at? Yes, I've used Quant Tower.
In market cap shed from Apple.
By the way, I should turn that off. Yeah. Yeah. So when I used Quant Tower, it was like 5 years ago, though. For the NQ DOM, well, so I think that you're always better trying to execute with the DOM. Especially when it's really fast like that. But I think that there's a really big limit to how well you can actually read the order flow in the DOM when it's moving that fast. And even more so, I think that there's a limit to how useful the order flow is on equity indexes themselves. Because so much of what goes on over there is just hedging trades that are being made in the individual stocks and options and things like that. And so some of the order flow that you see in ES can be really confusing and contradictory compared to in the 10-year where the order flow is very, very predictive of what it ends up doing. By the way, here in the treasuries, while it's about a 10,000 net contract sell, but I'd say it's a pretty decent downtrend. And it makes me wonder if, you know, we had the initial spike because that's a risk-off event, but now these speculators are coming in with the people aren't going to buy US debt. Right, that's kind of the double-headed nature of this, is that it probably does harm the economy to some extent, but there's inflation to some extent. There's deflation to some extent. And then the big one, maybe some countries say, well, I don't want to deal with the dollar at all. I don't need treasuries. I don't need dollars. Then that would be a big problem. But no, the downside's not getting alarming yet, but it's just that is the float that we're seeing right now, I think. What's your thoughts on Morgan Stanley calling? Oh, I had not seen that. I'm gonna have to go and read it. Oh well, hey, the robot had been short this whole time. Oh, you know what? That's so funny. So earlier, I said my robot is getting tossed around because here it took a trade that was break even, and then it took a short against the trend here. Was it, or no, was it a long? I guess it was a long. No. It was a short, and then here was a long. So, but then when I said it, it was when it went short again, because I thought that it was going to go higher, and it did go higher at first, but it stuck with it, and the flow eventually won. Do you see that? So can you see cumulative delta kind of going down? The market order imbalance going in favor of selling right here. That's interesting because the market order imbalance showed it very, very clearly. And while it is there in cumulative delta, it's not as obvious, right? So that's like the perfect example of where the robot should, of the sort of thing that we want the robot to do, or that we want the robot for. But I thought that it was a bad trade. I thought, oh, it's, price moved up a little bit. I think that the trend may continue to move up, but it's not. It got it. Got it really well, so it's kind of weird. Do you know of a NinjaTrader setting that prevents the software from using all the memory available in my computer? Is it because you're doing backtesting? Because so here's the thing. First of all, C# applications use more memory than applications written in other languages, generally speaking, because of reflection. So what is reflection? Reflection is every object that C# creates has metadata stored with the object as well to say, this is what I actually am. Right? I create an object that will say this is what object type I am. Here's where like my code actually resides, all of these sorts of things, right? And then that allows you to go in and say, find all of the objects of this type. Or like create a drop-down list based on all of the different available classes of this type. And that's what reflection allows you to do. So it can help you make boilerplate code, like general code, where like, if I make a new class in the future, like for instance, in NinjaTrader, I have indicators, right? I have all these subclasses of indicator. I want when I create an indicator, that's a new class, that's a new object, that it automatically shows up in my indicator list over here. Right? It uses reflection to do that. It's also how it does the properties, is that when you add an indicator over here, it then says, okay, what are all of the public properties of that? And I build this properties box from the public properties of that object. That is what reflection allows you to do. But you have to add that metadata for practically every object. And in a lot of situations, that metadata is larger than the actual data that you're storing in the object. So that's why C# uses so much memory. Okay? It's not like a huge deal unless you're running low on memory in general. And that's kind of the thing, is that in modern computers, for most people's use case, the memory hasn't been a huge deal. So it's like, yeah, you have 128 gigabytes of RAM. It's probably fine. Now, if you're using more than like 300 gigabytes, then there's something wrong, right? So like, let me show you mine. Where is it? So I'm using NinjaTrader. Oh, so you know what? I said 400, but it's using 800. It's using about 800, right? If I do a back test, then there are some weird things that can happen with back tests where it will all of a sudden be using like all of my memory. So when I back test, one thing is I would prefer to like shut everything else down so that it's just that back test that's running. And then there's some things like, especially if I'm doing like the machine learning stuff where I run through different iterations of it. There's an option where you save the results or not. Well, saving the results, that all sits in your memory. So if you're doing a really, really big optimization run, you want to have an indicator or a strategy that has that setting in it. Save, I forget exactly what it's called, save results. So what I've done, if I go into the editor, is I have a base strategy. And it does two things. It gives me debugging and it gives me save history. So here by default, I set save history to be false. And then I have, that's my property. My property is called save history. And NinjaTrader is include trade history in backtest. And so I can just turn it on and off in the strategy. So that's one big thing that helps you save memory. We can also, I think, if I come to the NinjaScript utilization monitor, I can kind of come in and see what's going on. So like the reason that I'm as high as I am at 800 is because I have that resting orders indicator on the chart. Because it's running for every market depth update, right? That's a lot. It's a lot. But, there's some other things like you don't necessarily want to have, I think it's really common to say, oh, well, okay, I have this chart. Like, let's add 90 days into it. Well, if you're not going to look back 90 days on that chart, don't add 90 days into it. Just have the past 3 days or whatever it is that you actually need to use. Don't have charts open that you don't really need. Things like that. Helps. Okay, so I'm wondering here. Okay, the volume has evened out a little bit, but they're still selling it pretty hard. Man, I'm browsing Reddit and there are so many people complaining about Donald Trump tweeting this morning. The traders hate it, which I think is kind of funny. Like, there should be some opportunity, right? Well, if you actually know what's going on. I don't feel like that the action in the treasury has been very good for us. I guess it's been good for the robot. Is the robot net profitable after all that? Because it did take 2 bad trades. No, it's not. It's down 3, no 5. It's down 5 ticks. Wait, how is that? Because that one's 0. Oh, that was actually pretty big. Yeah, that one from 09.5 to 04. No. 09.5 to 14. Yeah. That's almost 10 ticks in and of itself. That one. And then that one was small. But then this one was so big. Oh, you know what? Maybe... No, actually, I'm not sure. Okay. Let's come and look at the trade performance of it then. Just today. The 23rd. No, it says it took 4 trades. A 5 trade minus. Okay. And then it took the plus 10, so it still hadn't made it up. Okay. I didn't see where it took 4, though. 1, 2, 3, 4. But this one, it didn't make or lose anything on, so why isn't it showing me that? No, it's a little confusing. But I'm not going to worry about it. It's kind of curious because we are entering back into a period because of the volatility today, right? We are entering back into a period where we would expect the algorithm to do well. So it's kind of odd that it lasts so much on those first few trades. No, NinjaTrader doesn't have the MBO data. I think CR Charts does, right? I'm honestly though, I'm really just not super enthused or impressed by MBO data on your DOM. I really don't think that it's giving as much useful information as people think. There is some evidence that suggests that having the MBO data is like additional information that, you know, like some people that using algorithms and stuff in their research that it helped them. But for a person is where I'm kind of like, I'm not sure that it makes a difference. I think the only place where it would make a difference is if I'm using it to see stop orders, but I haven't heard anybody show anything like that. Maybe at some point, NinjaTrader will get the MBO data. We should look. Does ATAS have it? ATAS MBO. It sounds like they do. What's the logic behind the MBO? It's not like you'll be able to differentiate the origin of the order based on the size. Well, actually, first of all, you actually might in some cases, but that's not what they're trying to do for sure. I think that the main motivation behind it is to know exactly where you are in the queue. Right? So if you know all of the separate orders that are in the queue, they all have an ID, and then when an order canceled, it sends you a message saying order with this ID canceled. Then you know whether that order is before or after you in line. And especially for some of these algorithms, where exactly they are in line matters significantly to the performance of the strategy. So that's, I think, the primary motivation behind MBO. For us, there are some things like for instance, cumulative delta. There can be some situations in cumulative delta where because the feed that gives you the orders filling and the feed that is giving you the changes in the market depth, there can be situations where those two feeds get out of sync. And so because it's using the market depth to determine whether a particular market order was market buy or market sell, especially when you get these situations where it flickers back and forth across the price a bunch of times, the cumulative delta is not 100% accurate. In fact, I can find it can be as much as 10 to 20% off, which usually doesn't change like the shape of the actual chart, but does change the absolute numbers. Like right now from the session, I have negative 4,522, but yours might say something slightly different, right? With MBO data, it solves all of those problems. So all of the things that you are putting, that you are seeing with the market depth and the order flow and everything, are 100% accurate, right? And then the last thing, and I don't think that this was necessarily intentional, but it does seem like something that you can do with it, although for some reason not everybody's doing it, is you can detect stop orders, because a stop order apparently comes in as an update. So if you see a market order that comes in as an update instead of a new order, then you know it was a stop. Have you put together what the challenges are that you would want to solve for? Yeah. You want to see? Okay, so first we want to have something that is super performant, because C# is not necessarily as performant, but C++ is not memory safe and is a little difficult to program for. So we want to have something that is in Rust to be performant. And then instead of forcing them to write everything in Rust, we provide bindings for Python so that they can write all of the indicators and strategies in Python and use all of the machine learning stuff in Python. Okay, statistical tools built in. That means all of my stuff that I have for like, hey, when this particular situation happens, how does it tend to turn out, and what are the actual statistics for it, and how you display that. We kind of do it in a janky way on a chart. This would have built-in tools to show you statistics. Some of the tools that I've got, like spreads, we want those to be built into the platform. Cross-instrument trading, that be built in the platform. I think most of the platforms have this cross-instrument trading thing now, but there was a period where they didn't. At least Jigsaw has it now, right? Okay. I want it to be order flow for stocks. So there are platforms there are ways to get order flow for stocks, but it's basically like you're doing order flow on a futures platform with stock data, and so there's a little bit of jankiness to how that works. It doesn't integrate with the platform very well. So if the platform was built to be able to handle stocks as well from the very beginning, I think that would be a big advantage, because I think that there's a big advantage in order flow for stocks. Right? Okay. I do want MBO data. Yes. Statistical and seasonality charts. This is something that I haven't seen included in a platform. Seasonality charts. That's something that you can get like on your Bloomberg terminal, but I haven't seen it in any retail trading platforms. Okay. By stocks, do you mean? No, by stocks, I mean stocks. I mean, like, literally, I want to be able to see the order flow of GameStop. Which you can get through DXFeed. So I think that DXFeed would be like a default supported data platform. Right? The caching, that's all the stuff that my indicators do. So anything that is generated from the market depth information, instead of when you refresh the chart, it just erasing the stuff that was there because it can't calculate it from historical data, it saves what happened and loads it back into the chart. So that you can do that, and you can also do backtests on it, right? Okay. Tiling window management. So I want to be able to like open up new windows and or radically change my workspace very, very quickly. So that would be where I think you'd use a tiling window manager, and navigation that relies largely on the keyboard so that people could move around very, very quickly. Save keyboard in places like StarCraft. I think what that meant is like I should be able to go Control 1 and it will bring something else back up. Switch it to that really quickly. Okay, so this one I'm don't know if this is explained very well in the comments, so I'll go into more detail on this. It says one strategy, multiple accounts, so you can switch strategies based on performance. Basically, you might have a strategy that's streaky, so you only want to trade the strategy when it's performing well. But how do you know how well it's performing if the strategy's not actually trading right now? So what you do is you have it trade on sim, and it always takes the trades, but then, or it's always tracking the trades, but then it's has like a separate account for, okay, here's when I'm using that signal and when I'm not. And then you could have a whole thing built into the platform to help you switch between strategies based on what's performing well. That makes sense? Okay. Next, running a strategy against multiple instruments. So NinjaTrader's really good at, I have this one instrument, and how does it perform when I do this particular setup across the one instrument? But the way that most professional strategies in the commodities trading advisor space works is I'm running them across the whole universe of assets. So I want things built into the strategy analyzer that helps me define what my universe of assets is going to be, and then running my strategy against all of those instruments. Because what I can do in NinjaTrader is I can run it against the list. So I can get, here's how it performed on this instrument, and here's how it performed on this instrument. But I see what the end result for ZN is and what the end result for ES is. And it doesn't actually show me the trade by trade change of it, so that I can actually see what the drawdowns were and all of that, right? So basically, a backtester, more advanced backtester that basically allows me to do momentum strategies out of the box, right? Configurations stored in files for easy sharing. I think NinjaTrader has a bit of that, but we could probably take it a little bit further so that everything is just stored in JSON code, and I can just pass you the JSON file. Okay, show me the number of iterations. This is something that NinjaTrader should implement, that I would want to be in there. Is like when you're doing an optimization run, it doesn't calculate how many iterations they're going to be until you click the button. And I want to be able to see how many it's going to be before I click run, so that I can say, actually, maybe that's too much. Okay. A mobile version, I don't know if I'd have like a full mobile version, but I would want to have at least some degree of integration with mobile. Right. Properties show up on the side instead of in a modal window. I don't know why I put that one on there, but okay.
Order canceled.
Okay, include latency option in backtest. So one of the things that it does is it will say, like, here's the beginning of the bar. Here's what the price was at the beginning of the bar, and that's what it gives you, right? But what you could do to get a more accurate backtest is you could say, always assume that, like, from when you decide to make the trade, that it's like 50 milliseconds for you to get filled after that. And so then if you have the more granular data, you wouldn't necessarily need to have it by tick, but like, let's say that you have it every 100 milliseconds. You could always assume that 100 milliseconds change in there, and that would give you a more accurate backtest, right? And then I guess some of the things that I didn't mention is example machine learning strategies. And that's kind of the big one, is I want to be able to, you can do machine learning stuff right now if you kind of build the sidecar server and send information back and forth. But I want something that, you know, you can do natively. so that you get a lot of people doing it and advice on how to do it and so forth. Does it make sense to choose Rust if most of the latency actually comes from the data feed and execution with your broker? So if that was the only reason was for it to be fast, then it probably wouldn't make sense, right? I think one of the big things why like C# is so popular, for instance, is because you know, it's a lot easier to build and you can get something that works so much faster, right? But you know, some of the bottlenecks that I'm interested in are like there's a limit to how many times your GUI updates per second, right? And with the appropriate with the appropriate framework, which doesn't exist but theoretically could exist in Rust, you could get 255 updates a second. So there's things like that. And then on top of that, like the modern features and memory safety. Right. So like the amount that it would make you faster. I guess, oh, you know, I didn't see this on it either. So let's add it in here. Headless mode. So this would be like a mode where you can run it where it's just designed to run the algorithm or something like that, and not all of the charts in the GUI, so that if you were running it on like a co-located server, it would work, right? It would do that. Okay, well, we haven't completely given up the gains, but it's enough of it. I'm a little concerned. I can see there's probably still some orders trapped from the initial jump, but I'm very, very concerned that this nobody's gonna buy treasuries thing. I really don't think that the EU really changes that, but I don't know. It's a weekend. It could be related to the 3-day weekend that's coming up as well. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, well, it's a problem, Gus, is that I do not have the time or resources to build it. And I think that it's a multi-person thing. So if we really got into it, you know, I would need help. And you're one of the people that I would be at the top of my list to work on it, because you've done a lot of stuff and you've been around for a while. You and Brad, I think me, you, and Brad, we could maybe do it, but it would still take us a while. Yeah, or we find funds. So I actually, when I was looking for a job, I investigated that quite extensively, but my conclusion was that right now was just not the time. If the economy crashes and like interest rates come down, then maybe we do it, right? or maybe if the technology changes a little bit, we'll see. Okay, I'm like a little bit over. I should get going. So I will see. I will be here on Monday. We'll probably be doing some programming. I don't know if it will be with ATAS or if it will be with our algorithm, but we'll be looking at some stuff on Monday. And if not, if that's too boring for you, I'll see you guys Tuesday. So in the meantime, stay excellent, team.